This is the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado is a spontaneous discussion of the issues. Funding for the state of Colorado is provided by the Adolph Coors Foundation, the Monfort Family Foundation, and Public Service Company, providing Coloradans with environmentally sound energy choices through wind source and the Renewable Energy Trust. Now, Don Kinney.
Good evening. Hopes and dreams are part of Colorado developments of this week. Guy Kelly, a National Commission hearing on race was sidetracked by protests. Dan Luzadder, legislators begin adjusting funding proposals. Of hoops and hopes, Dave Kriegel will join us in a few minutes. Now, Dan Issel is the top man of the Denver Nuggets. Penny Parker, the ski industry is banking on sustained growth. Latest example, investment in Copper Mountain. Joe Garner, the mousetrap. One day you may drive through without delay. Don't bet on it. Denver was the 7th stop of the president's initiative on race, a goal of One America. The arrangement provided little harmony. Guy Kelly.
Well, President Clinton's advisory board came to town and might have found One America, but lots of different people in it, including the American Indians, who weren't happy at all Monday night during the town meeting that there wasn't a representative of the Native American community on the board. At the beginning of the session, Glenn Morris of the American Indian Movement stood up, started yelling about lack of representation on the panel, and it spread like wildfire through the meeting. There was hundreds of people there, and you know, in an age when a lot of protests are choreographed and orchestrated, there was a real element of spontaneity to this that was unusual, where people of the same mindset joined in and started shouting at the board and its members and essentially took control of the meeting Monday night.
This is an 11-member traveling panel.
It's made up of some White House people, former governors, academics, and John Hope Franklin, who is an 83-year-old Presidential Medal of Honor winner and a very distinguished scholar, who was shouted down Monday as well. And you know, obviously it raises the question, why doesn't a panel on race have an American Indian on it? And the White House's explanation is that it was never intended to have a representative of every minority community in the nation, and that the people on it are sensitive to those issues and take those concerns back to Washington on behalf of those communities.
This group is really devoting itself to intellectual endeavors.
And that didn't go over too well with the crowds who wanted to talk about their real lives and how racism and prejudice have affected their lives in the workplace and the justice system, et cetera. And on the stage were mostly academics trading theories about racial stereotyping and their consequences for society. Didn't go over that well.
John Hope Franklin says messages do go to the president, and in fact, we will see action.
They've taken it back to Washington, and he may consider putting another board member on his panel to represent that community. But when they tried that before, they found out there were so many Native American communities that they really couldn't agree on one American Indian to represent all of their diverse interests either. So it's become a real problem, and it's probably going to continue to be so for the Clinton administration.
Joe Garner would like to ask a question.
How has this panel been received in other cities where it's appeared? Has it received a hostile reaction or hostile greeting there, or is Denver unique in the reaction?
Not as intensely hostile as this week's meeting in Denver. They have gotten beaten up on the same issues in Santa Fe, and I think in San Jose, California as well. But this was by far the most intense reaction they got from the crowd to what people perceive as the shortcomings of this, what some people call the dog and pony show that's out traveling around the nation now.
When some people did talk, they said that essentially there is a problem with the image that we have of minorities on television and in films.
The media took its share of lumps for perpetuating what some people consider racist stereotypes that affect how people not only see themselves, but of course how members of the majority relate to the others in the community. And they say until those things, there has to be a sweeping change and reevaluation of the way they're perceived by the media, or else these stereotypes are going to persist and continue to be problems for them.
Was this essentially a media event?
I think it's part of Clinton's, it is a media event, and that Clinton wants to demonstrate his commitment to pursuing harmony among the various races in this nation. And to that extent, it has been a media event, but it's like the show in Akron on the possibility of a war in Iraq. It's backfired on them in a couple of instances on this tour.
And finally, Guy Kelly, as an observer of the events, of the hearings, of the talk, did it do any good at all?
A lot of the people in the audience didn't think so. They were upset that it was all talk and no action. They want to see concrete proposals come out of this that really change laws, change the environment in the workplace, and make lives better for people. But they're not sure that's going to happen given the people that were sent out on this panel to talk to them.
Guy Kelly of the Rocky Mountain News. Earlier this week, I think it was Wednesday, it called Dan Luzadder, who's State House reporter for the Rocky Mountain News, and said, "Come join us Friday evening. Let's talk about what's being done at the State House." He said, "Not much." Dan Luzadder.
Well, that's not an exact quote, Don.
Actually, you said they haven't accomplished a darn thing.
Well, they have accomplished a few things, but this session hasn't been as interesting as some, and I think we can attribute a lot of that to the fact that this is a big election year and term limits, and there are going to be a lot of changes in the State House come November, and so people aren't as aggressive out there as they might be. But
currently, the crunch is how to adjust the dollars for funding the state next year.
Yeah, among the exciting things we're doing, we've got a $10.9 billion budget, but they can't spend that much of it. So this week they've spent time in caucus, both the Republicans and the House Republicans and Democrats, talking about how to steal money from one line item and put it in another to fund some programs. And there's just not that much flexibility in the budget anymore.
And you noted in one of your stories, they're looking at taking money from welfare to help.
That's right. And this has caused some controversy with the Democrats more than the Republicans. The maintenance of effort that the state is required to maintain under the new federal welfare guidelines has been about 92%. We can go down to 80. So we're going down to 80 apparently, and they're going to save some money in the budget that way.
A cynic would observe it's ironic that you talk about taking money from welfare, yet you talk about $200–300 million for a stadium.
Yeah, well, people are noting that, and there have been a lot of talk about putting all this money into a stadium, and then while schools are going begging. I think Ron Tupa said schools are getting the table scraps, while Pat Boland is getting a nice healthy chunk, perhaps.
Are legislators sensitive to how this could turn negative?
I think some of them are, but given that the stadium issue is going to a vote of the people can decide, and it kind of takes legislators off the hook.
One of the big budget factors every year is to fund the construction of new prisons, or after they're built, to put people in them to manage them. What, 600 new employees are needed?
Roughly 600 new employees, and a lot of new beds are going to come online this year, and it's costing a lot of money, and Democrats are running around in the State House saying corrections is the new entitlement, and the governor sent letters this week to legislators saying we need to think about prevention rather than problems, correcting problems, and corrections is a problem.
Dan Luzadder, on January 7th, the day the legislature opened, you wrote, among the more than 100 proposed laws to greet the legislators are seat belts for dogs, reckless driving citations for cell phone users, banning of resale of unsafe cribs, and outlawing cruising. Any recollection of what happened?
Well, let's see. We lost cruising. We lost seat belts for dogs. And what else did we lose? The thing that's still alive is
unsafe cribs.
Unsafe cribs. There's been some adjustments in that. Not as strong a bill as it was, but that's still alive. The rest of them are gone.
State House reporter Dan Luzadder of the Rocky Mountain News. Destination skiers, the people who come from other states to the slopes of Colorado, are making the business a little more profitable. The numbers coming are higher. And that means big corporate interests are investing more money in Colorado slopes. Penny Parker.
Well, we had the announcement this week that the owners of Copper Mountain Interwest Corp out of Vancouver, BC, will invest $66 million in that ski resort, the most ever in its 26-year history.
Vail has, made a commitment for $74 million for 4 ski areas in the last year.
They spent that this year. We have yet to know what they're going to spend in the season coming up. Likely that they would spend more. Of course, they're infused with a lot of public capital since they did go public last year.
There must be a great expectation that skiing isn't going to fade.
There is that expectation, but there's also the necessity to invest in the slopes in order to keep people coming. People more and more want the high-speed quads. They don't want to stand in lines. They don't want to hassle with equipment. They don't want to have to park far away and then truck their stuff to the resorts. We all want convenience, and convenience costs.
One of the aspects about this investment in copper is that they will make a much larger area of snowmaking to get into that annual race for, I suppose that's a media thing too, first day of skiing.
You're on to us. It is a media thing. But it is 110 more acres that they're going to have the snowmaking ability. And it's bragging rights to say that they got open first. You know, Keystone has been beating Loveland for the past few years, but Keystone also can hit the lights because of the night skiing ability and turn on their snowmaking, and so start skiers out a little earlier.
One of the major factors in the success of the ski areas is not skiers, but snowboarders.
Snowboarding is still the growth industry in the downhill snow sports arena, definitely. And what they're finding actually right now, Don, is that more skiers are trading in their 2 sticks for their 1 board and actually being attracted to, you know, going out and trying something different. Even us 40-year-olds supposedly are strapping on the board and giving it a go.
Now, one aspect of skiing is this last year, what they called it the parabolic ski, a very expensive ski, has not sold at all well.
Well, this was shocking, actually. I think the manufacturers and the retailers are all sort of scratching their heads saying, wait a minute, this is the most fantastic innovation in skiing since the plastic boot. Why aren't consumers getting the message? And they're all sort of pointing fingers back and forth to each other saying, it's your fault, no, it's your fault, no, it's your fault. And I think that coming out of the Las Vegas ski show last month, they realized they have to actually get together and figure out how are we going to get our message across, because it benefits all of us to sell these skis to consumers.
Cross-country skiing is doing pretty well. Snowshoeing, even better.
Snowshoeing, even better. It's a no-brainer. You put on these, you know, these large panels on your feet and just walk. What could be simpler? You don't have to take a lesson. You don't have to buy a lift ticket. You don't have to exert yourself if you don't want to, or you can. You can get an aerobic workout from it.
So generally, the going down the snow hill is doing very well?
No, I wouldn't say that. It's a little too soon to say. I think the last numbers were about 3% increase in Colorado. And Colorado, we have to remember, is the exception. That throughout the country for the last 20 years, skiing has been flat or declined, actually. So it's still an uphill battle, if you will.
Accepting that pun, why are the big corporate interests putting so much money on the line then?
Part of it has to do with the upcoming generation, the echo boomers, the children of the baby boomers, which again is